Good morning, all book lovers, those who love books, who love literature. This is Johnny on a Monday morning here in West Michigan. It is 8:23 in the morning. It is September the 21st, and this is tomorrow. Officially will be the first day of fall. Tomorrow, the 22nd of September. I'm on page 890 in my diary, my paper diary. This morning I'm just waking up. I've only been up about an hour and 20 minutes. And have my Bible next to me. I haven't really been feeling like reading the Bible in the morning. I've just been kind of out of it. So I kind of get up in the morning. Well, lately when I get up in the morning, my wife has been listening to R.C. Sproul on her phone. So when I'm waking up in the morning, my wife is listening to these sermons by R.C. Sproul, who recently passed away. When I was in seminary, I had a couple of classes with R.C. Sproul on the doctrine of God and on the Westminster Shorter Catechism. Many years ago, when I first got into the Reformed faith, I used to read the books by R.C. Sproul, but I was never really, he's more of a popularizer of Reformed theology. But anyway, so in the morning I sit there when I'm waking up. My wife is listening to R.C. Sproul, and so maybe that's what my devotions in the mornings. I don't know, my throat is all clogged. Excuse me. So, writing in my diary. I have my Bible next to me. Sometimes you just got to force yourself to read the Bible. You got to force yourself to read something that you just don't feel like reading in the morning. So I don't know. I might try. But I'm mainly here because, as I mentioned last week, my wife and I went out looking for used chairs. My wife has recently started a neighborhood women's book club, and she needed some extra chairs for the living room when the women gather. So we found these old dentist chairs at some thrift store for $15 a piece. And when we found also an office, well, we needed a new chair for where our computer is in the living room, and it's just some cheap chair we found. My wife and I are not into having we're not really, don't care that much about what things look like as long as they're functional. So anyway, as we were at these thrift stores and resale shops, we looked at used books, and these are the used books that I don't know why my throat is so clogged this morning. Anyway, I showed you this book. So we went to the thrift stores, and we looked at used books. My wife's been buying a lot of used books lately, but these are the ones I found. I showed you this one. I've been reading this last couple of days, Familiar by J. Robert Lennon. I noticed last night when I was reading this that there's a review by a guy named Scott Bradfield. I watch his videos. I've been watching him for a couple of years. He teaches, it's like a professor of literature, and he has a YouTube site, Scott Bradfield, and I noticed that he has a little review on there. Over the last decade, J. Robert Lennon's literary imagination has grown increasingly morbid, convoluted, and peculiar, just as his books have grown commensurately more surprising, rigorous, and fun. So I was reading that. And I found this Mary Gordon novel at last week at thrift stores. The Love of My Youth. Excuse me. Anyway, I have this already in our library by Mary Gordon. I collect her writings, but I found this one by her. And then I found Mountaineering Essays by John Muir. He's famous for his Sierra Club Yosemite. He was a naturalist in the 19th century. Carol and I, we collect the writings of John Muir. And then I found this novel by Maggie O'Farrell, The Vanishing Act of Esme Lennox. I had this in paperback and I found it a hardback. Then I found a novel by Muriel Spark, The Only Problem. Muriel Spark, I collect her writings. I didn't have this one in our library. And then this guy, he writes on Christianity and more just basic Christianity. He wrote, the last book I bought, I found used. He wrote called The Holy Warriors on the Crusades. This one's called Laying Down the Sword, Why We Can't Ignore the Bible's Violent Verses by Philip Jenkins. He also wrote The Lost History of Christianity. So it's this book on Christianity. And then I found this Library of America, Liebling, his World War II writings. I showed you several months ago, my wife found this biography on Just Enough Liebling, the classic work by the legendary New Yorker writer. These are like his writings, and these are his Second World War writings. So he wrote for the New Yorker, and these are kind of like different essays and articles that he wrote for the New Yorker. I also found at one thrift store some jazz CDs. Birth of the Cool by Miles Davis. This is a Blue Note Volume 1 by Miles Davis. And I found Kenny Burrell. He was a very famous jazz guitarist. This is the Blue Note years. This is the best of Kenny Burrell. And then I found Art Blakey, a very famous jazz drummer. Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. So yeah, I'm always looking for jazz. I like jazz music. I'm not really a big jazz fan, but I like listening to jazz. And I found another novel by Chuck Palahniuk, Invisible Monsters Remix. Michelle Fulbert, Madness and Civilization, History of Insanity in the Age of Reason. I'm probably mispronouncing his French name, but he's very famous. I collect his writings. I have his biography, and like he wrote, he's written very famous books. I'm always looking for them. He wrote like all kinds of stuff. The History of Sexuality, Volume 1. Introduction, The History of Sexuality, Volume 2, The Use of Pleasure. History of Sexuality, Volume 3, The Care of the Self. Discipline and Punishment, The Birth of the Prison. The Birth of the Clinic, in archaeology or of medical perception. Madness and Civilization and History of Insanity in the Age of Reason. So I found that. And then I collect the writings of Neil Stevenson, The Diamond Age, or Young Lady's Illustrated Primer. I have 4 or 5 or 6 of his novels. They're like science fiction, cyberpunk. And then I found Richard Powers' last novel, The Overstory by Richard Powers. I collect the writings of Richard Powers. I have like 11 or 12 of his novels. This is when he won the winner of the Pulitzer Prize last year. And then I found Timothy Egan. This is a nonfiction, A Pilgrimage to Eternity from Canterbury to Rome in Search of Faith. He goes on a pilgrimage to renew his Catholic faith. I have a couple other books by him. He wrote a book on the Dust Bowl. He wrote a book on all kinds of interesting books. Timothy Egan. He's a really interesting writer. His book on the Dust Bowl, The Worst of Hard Time, won a National Book Award, non-fiction. He wrote The Immortal Irishman, a New York bestseller. He wrote about the photographer Edward Curtis, Short Nights of the Shadow Catcher, things like that. He writes interesting books. And then I found by the South American writer Muriel Vargas Llosa, The Discreet Hero. I collect his writings. I didn't have this one. I was really amazed. It's a hardback edition, first edition. I have a whole shelf of his books, his writings. He's one of my favorite South American writers. I think he's from... I can't remember, it says here. Anyway, these are my favorite writers. Check them out. So those are the used books that I found last week. The Diamond Age by Neil Stevenson and Pilgrimage to Eternity by Timothy Egan. Found some jazz CDs, Miles Davis, and Liebling World War II writings in the Library of America. Foucault, The Madness of Civilization. Jack Pollock, Invisible Remix. The Laying Down the Sword, Why We Can't Ignore the Bible's Violent Verses by Philip Jenkins. Novel by Muriel Sparks, The Only Problem. A novel by Maggie O'Farrell, The Vanishing Act of Esme, Lennox. Nature Writings by John Muir, The Mountaineering Essays. A novel by Mary Gordon, The Love of My Youth. And Familiar by John J. Robert Lennon. I have coming this week his novel, The Mailman. Yeah, check out Scott Bradfield's YouTube site. He's really interesting. Talks about books. He's really into science fiction and fantasy. So I read yesterday Swans, Sacrifice and Transcendence, the oral history by Nick Soulsby. I finished that yesterday. I have all the CDs by the Swans and Michael Guerra, The Angels of Light. And one I didn't have, it was a project that Michael Guerra did after the Swans, and it was just one project. And I had the CD and I looked for 2 days and I found it yesterday morning. It's called The Body Lovers and The Body Haters. It's one of those solo projects of Michael Guerra from the Swans and the Angels of Light. It took me 2 days to find this thing. So check out their new DVD, Where Does a Body End? Swans, Where Does a Body End? It's a documentary on the band, the Swans. So when when I read through this, as you go through each chapter, it goes through different recordings. And so I get out the CDs and I listen to the music that's being talked about by these different people, musicians and people who are involved in the recordings. And if you're really into the Swans, this is really a good introduction to their music and who they are, and Michael Guerra. So that's it. Like I said, I'm kind of out of it lately, the last couple of mornings. I'll probably read throughout this week. I'll probably read The Familiar. I'm still reading the Red Pill by Hershagura. And these books I got at thrift stores. I'll take down the lower level after I end this video. I still listen to some jazz. You can't go wrong with Miles Davis, Art Blakely, and Kenny Burrell, if you're into classic jazz. So yeah, that's about it. I don't have anything going on this week. I get up in the morning, I write in my diary, I read, afternoon, have a meal, read in the afternoons, drift into the evening hours, and then time to go to bed. So yeah, so I hope you had a good weekend, you have a good reading week. And so I thank you for the comments and for the new subscribers, and to pray you're all doing well during this pandemic. And until next time, bye.